Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 137.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on true custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores. 4 podcasts ago, in episode 133, we heard from Gary Nicol and Karl Morris about the content in their book, The Lost Art of Putting. And it was a great interview. At the time, I knew that their new book, The Lost Art of Playing Golf, would be published soon. So Gary and Karl sent me a pre-publication electronic copy of the book, and I read it. And you are going to learn some fascinating insights today from Gary and Karl. Some of the great concepts that they share in their new Just Hitting the Streets book, The Lost Art of Playing Golf.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with episode 137 of the Golf Improvement Podcast. And today, welcome back, Gary Nicol. Welcome back, Gary Nicol and Karl Morris, authors of the best-selling The Lost Art of Putting and right now, I guess, Just Hitting the Streets, their new book, The Lost Art of Playing Golf. Gary's been a golf coach for more than 30 years, and Karl has been a performance coach for about 25 years, and they've coached successfully golfers at every level of accomplishment. So this is going to be one of the first ones, I guess, that you folks have done related to the new book. I read it before, and I really enjoyed it, and it's going to be fun to talk about some of the things. Gary and Karl, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tony. Good to be back with you again.
Yeah, it was episode.
It
was episode 133. So it's only about 4 episodes ago. So I feel very fortunate to get to talk with you again. Well,
pleasure.
Well, thank you first for your new book. Can you talk a little bit about how it came about? Did you know you were going to write it before you first published The Lost Art of Putting? And any insights about the final month, I would call it, right? About, getting this thing to press, because that's always fun, right?
It's like
fun would be one word.
It's like coming up the last hole, Tony, with a 2-shot lead, but you've got Tiger Woods tailing behind.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. We hadn't actually planned on writing a second book before we had the first one done. However, halfway through the process of writing the first book, The Lost Art of Putting, the publishers suggested that they really liked what we were coming up with, and they suggested we should do a follow-up. So we thought, why not? So that's pretty much how it came about. And again, as with the very first book, it was really just a way of kind of formalizing our ideas, getting our ideas together and down on paper to see what we came up with, basically.
I think what was really encouraging, Tony, was the feedback that we were getting from the first book, The Lost Art of Putting, because we kept getting emails from literally all over the world, and the thing that kind of resonated or seemed to resonate with everybody was that we weren't actually telling them to do anything. It wasn't the kind of standard instructional book where we'll give you option, we tell you where to put your hands or how to move your shoulders or whatever. It was really just asking you a bunch of questions for you to consider yourself and then formulate some of your own opinions about the best way to go forward. And it seemed to really strike a chord with people. I think, in this day and age, there's so much information out there, and there's so many people telling us how we should do things. And we kind of believe that there's maybe a different route that you can go down to get a bit closer to what you need to do rather than what somebody else thinks you should do.
Yeah, I think you captured that well. Yeah, you provide options for people, and near the end, we're going to come back to that. I'm going to talk about at least how I plan to use the book in the future. But you just don't have to grab everything. But there are going to be things that will resonate with different golfers and help them to play better.
Yeah, we hope that's the case.
Yeah. Well, so let's jump in a little bit and. In the beginning, I think mostly in the beginning of the book, you talked about a couple of things. Knowing your why for playing golf. And then, the skill of gratitude. Talk about why these are valuable for enjoying your golf, but also playing great golf.
Karl, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah. I think it's such an important concept. I mean, I think, maybe Gary and myself are of a similar vintage, and you get to a point in life where you lose some close friends, and my mother passed away recently, and you become far more aware of your kind of mortality. And I think it was this underlying sense that got us to ask some deeper questions for this second book. And I think we've all fallen into the trap of thinking that if I can play good golf, I'll be happy. And unfortunately, with that assumption, we tend to be waiting most of the time. And you see so many miserable people on the golf course, and yet when you step back and you start to look at it, and you think, it was a Fred Shoemaker idea that how would you approach this round of golf if you knew it was your very last round and you were never going to play again? And suddenly you would probably appreciate a little bit more the surroundings, and you'd appreciate the condition of the golf course and the things that had gone into making the opportunity happen, and the chance to create some golf shots. And the paradox seems to be for us that if you can get into that state of gratitude without this being wishy-washy, we're not saying
that's right.
We're not saying that score isn't important, and one of the purposes of the book is trying to people help shoot lower scores. But what we're saying is that we really believe that you need to go first as an individual. That if you actually feel good about the opportunity to play today, and you're grateful for that opportunity, those are actually optimal conditions to get the best out of yourself. And you kind of inversely then work into scoring lower. But we point out in the book, we don't want you to play the gratitude trap of you say, well, I'll be grateful today as long as I play well, because it doesn't really work that way.
That's a totally different thing.
It's about embracing the fact that. We talk about it in the book. It sounds a bit macabre, really, and a bit dark. But who's to say that the next round that you play isn't going to be the last one? And in some ways, when you actually embrace that concept, even though it is a bit dark, that it can be very liberating, because you do have a sense of gratitude of what you've got for today. And Gary works in a wonderful place up in Scotland, just right in between Muirfield and North Berwick, a place called Archerville. And I always say to him that when I go up there, the thing that you've got to be careful of is that you don't take this place for granted ever. It's such a wonderful place, but I think we all are a bit guilty of that we stop looking around us, and we stop looking at the beautiful terrain that we play golf on, and the opportunity of social interaction and all the other things that golf can potentially bring. But it as I say, it is a reverse way into playing better. It's going first rather than waiting for the golf ball to make you feel good.
Yeah, that's a great way to capture what you put in the book. Yeah, and anything else you want to share related to that, or we'll move
Gary,
on?
I don't know if you.
Yeah, we could go on for hours on this topic, to be honest. I think Karl's hit the nail on the head there. It's very easy to become blasé about your surroundings and about, the opportunity to go and play. You buy a new driver that's great for a couple of weeks, then you get a bit fed up with it because you miss a couple of fairways, and you start getting a bit grumpy about your game and about yourself, and then you start looking for things that are wrong with the golf course, and all of a sudden it's a downward spiral. But if you actually think about what you're grateful for before you even get to the golf course, just the fact that you wake up in a nice warm bed, you can go for a nice hot shower, put some nice clean clothes on, jump in your car, take a nice drive to the golf course, have a coffee and a bit of breakfast before you go out to play. All these things we kind of take for granted, become very blasé about, which is a dangerous trap to fall into. You know, we've all got 1,000. There's 1,000 people I know would love to be able to, take a day off work and go and play golf. And as Karl said, we see a lot of very angry people on the golf course. But actually, if they sit down and think about it, why do they play golf in the first place? We ask that question all the time. And the answers are varied and various, but they generally come up with things like, well, I like being outdoors. I enjoy the camaraderie. I enjoy spending time with my friends. I enjoy the challenge. I enjoy just being able to walk about in a beautiful place for a few hours and switch off from the outside world. But it's very easy to forget about all these things when you carved one into the trees off the first tee.
When you duck hook one off the first tee, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's very easy to forget about all these reasons on the back of a bad shot, which is crazy, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talk about in the book, Tony, is that the idea that you need to think about why you play golf when you play golf. And it's a really, really interesting way of looking at it, that, because I think when you get clear on why you're actually playing this game before you play, and you write some of these things down and you get some clarity on it, then you're a bit more likely to stay connected to that when you go out there and the chaos takes over and the double bogeys and the inevitable bad shots happen. But I think the more you can keep in mind why you play golf, when you play golf, as I said earlier, you'll probably get closer to the optimum state for you to express the ability that you've got.
Yeah. Well, let's go on to the next. And actually, the next two questions are kind of connected. I would say over the last month, and I'm grateful for playing golf about once a week, because that's about all I can fit in with my business and doing podcasts and all the things that I do. But over the last month or so, I've really changed what happens when I go to the golf course. And I would say in the past, when I warmed up on the short game area, I just kind of hit shots, and now I drop 8 or 9 balls in different places, and I attempt to make each of those shots be as close as possible to something that happens on the golf course. And then I might drop 4 or 5 balls in the sand trap, okay, and hit to different targets, but be intent about what I'm doing. And then on the practice tee, instead of I used to hit 6 irons, 7 irons, hybrids and all that, and kind of work up to my driver. And now I pretty much start with the driver and pretend it's the first hole, hit the second shot. If I think I hit it short, try to hit a little wedge and play the first 3 or 4 holes. And that's how I kind of warm up. And I think it's really made a difference. And I think you talk about those kind of things, some in your book. So,
Yeah, we do indeed. I mean, that's something we've both done a lot with a lot of the players we've worked with over the years. And there are various benefits to be had from that. I think the biggest one is you're kind of training for what you're going to experience on the golf course. And also, by the time you get to the first tee, basically, if you think about it, most people warm up, they'll hit maybe, 10 wedges, 10 7-irons, half a dozen 4-irons, couple of 3-woods, 8 or 9 drivers, and then, think they're ready to go and play golf. But in actual fact, what you've just done in the range bears absolutely no resemblance to what you're going to encounter on the golf course. And I often say, if you've got to hit 10, 6 or 7 irons in a row on the golf course, you're in serious trouble. Because the first 8 or 9 haven't been very good if you've got to keep hitting another one. And also, one of the big benefits that we have by the feedback we've received from helping people with this is by the time they get to the golf course, they actually feel like they're in playing mode. One of the big difficulties a lot of golfers have is transferring their range game. We've all been there. You hit it great on the range, and then you struggle to transfer that onto the golf course. Well, it's because there are 2 very different environments. You're going from one environment to the next. But if you are, as you've been doing there, playing the first 4 or 5 holes on the golf course, on the range, if you like, both mentally and physically, you're much better prepared for what you're going to face on the golf course. And you're in playing mode straight away. You don't have to jump from one to the next.
See, if you look at it, Tony, again, we allude to this in the book about thinking about the game differently, that if you're going to play golf, you've basically got anything from 65 to 95 individual problems to solve when you're out on the golf course. And every one of those problems is markedly different from the other ones. You know, your drives, your fairway shots, your bunker shots, every hole is different. The wind direction is different. The lie is different. So all those different problems need to be solved in an individual moment in time. And yet, you know, we've all, you know, I did it more than anybody else, stand there on the range and think, if I can just repeat this movement over and over again, it will come with me onto the golf course. And it just doesn't work that way. The golf swing isn't just stored in the brain as a file that you can just pull out and it just repeats all the way. We all know that doesn't happen. Even the best players in the world say that, you know, what felt great yesterday doesn't necessarily feel good tomorrow. But I think if you start to get your head around the fact that you have the capability to solve all of these different problems, well, why don't you start solving problems before you go out there? And exactly as you've just described, you know, you think about the shot that you're going to hit on the first, and you think about a par 3 that you're going to play a shot to, and you imagine that you're actually there. So you're beginning to solve problems before you actually go out onto the golf course. So you're not only getting your body moving, but you're actually tuning your mind in to the very same requirements that you're going to get when you're out on the course itself.
It's been a really fun way, and maybe a little bit for me too, because, you know, I don't go and practice much, but it just helps me get engaged. But this next thing, you know, when I first read these words, they were some of the favorite words I really had in the book. Okay, and the thought about thinking about your third shots. Okay, I just never thought about short game things like that. And it's just a great way to reflect on, you know, for most times, the importance of the third shot when you have it, you know, not only if you're trying to get up and down, but sometimes you might be in a situation. A friend of mine went to a pretty expensive golf school, and one of the things he got from it is, you know, sometimes your third shot, you ought to just say, you know, it's not likely I'm going to get it close. And if, you know, you're a 10 handicapper or 15, you've probably saved a shot by just getting it on the green, giving yourself a chance. So
yeah,
talk about, you know, your concept of third shots.
I think a lot of golfers, club golfers, amateur golfers, if they are going to rehearse the shots they're going to play in the golf course, they probably think about their tee shots. They probably think about their approach shots. But I doubt very much they're spending a whole lot of time thinking about, they're probably not even aware of where the majority of the third shots are played from. You know, if you kind of look back over the last 2 or 3 times you've played, you can probably remember your tee shot on the first, your second shot on the first, and then without thinking too much about it, you probably jump on the second hole before you've even played your third shot on the first. So most golfers they'll know that if they hit a drive, it's a 7-iron into the first green or whatever it is, but they tend not to hit the first green very often. And the patterns will form. They probably miss in the same spots time after time after time, but they don't really pay a whole lot of attention to that because they're so frustrated at the fact they've missed the green. They're not really tuned into the third shot, so the third shot kind of passes them by. But if you tune into where you're going to play these shots from, as you say, you don't have to hit every green in regulation. If you are 10, 15 handicap, you know, greens in regulation, if you hit 8 greens in regulation, 6 greens in regulation, you're doing pretty well. So that's when the third shots of the short game really start to come in. And they're so important, but so often overlooked.
I think if most golfers look back over the previous few rounds, Tony, and actually just analyse what they did with the third shot, they'll probably find a lot of occasions where they've maybe got out of position on a par 4 with the second shot and then tried to play an impossible recovery with that third shot, thinking, oh, I've got to make par. When actually, if you can, I call it handicap greens in regulation, whereby, you know, relative to the level that you play at, you know, the key thing to make sure that you do is if you can't get a green in standard regulation, make sure you're on there with that third shot, because, you know, for most golfers, even the best players, you know, bogey doesn't hurt that much, but it's when you take on that impossible third shot, you end up in the trap, short-sided, then you blade one out the other, and all of a sudden you've racked up 7 from nowhere, and you've not even, you know, the first 2 shots you hit may have not been that bad, but it's just understanding the effect of that third shot will be so important to your overall score. And as I say, if people were to just look back over the previous few rounds, they'll find some strong evidence of that. And then you can adapt your strategy accordingly then when you start to look at that.
This is a little different where we are today because we had a little technical issue. We'll call it our second or third shot when we started recording last week. But so we're going to pick it up with talking about, one of the great concepts in the book, which is about third shots. And we did some discussion previously about that, but where we left it was, how great it is when you're just able to accept that all your third shots don't have to be perfect, right? That you get the ball on the green, if it's a real difficult shot, and you just accept the fact that, sometimes you're going to make a putt, sometimes not. Talk a little bit more about, just getting more comfortable with third shots.
Yeah, I think the key thing, Tony, on that one is that what we see, this is probably more sort of 5 handicap upwards, is that a lot of golfers, when they're playing the third shot, so into par fours, for instance, because they've got out of position, they'll try and play the impossible shot, third shot, trying to make par. And very often that then leads to the short side themselves just getting more and more trouble. And very often, if you just hit that green with your third shot, just make sure that you get what I call a handicap green in regulation. You might not have got the green in regulation as such, but make sure that you're on the green with that next one. And what might seem a conservative play puts you in position. The worst thing that's going to happen to you is that you make bogey, but you'll roll some of those putts in occasionally. And again, for most players, even at the top level, bogeys don't hurt that much. Everybody makes them. It's the doubles, triples, and quads that really destroy scores. And when you really drill down into your third shots in any given round, if you're to go back and analyse it, that's where a lot of shots are going missing.
Absolutely. I think what tends to happen is, which we all think that our tee shot is a little bit offline, or the second shot wasn't quite on the green. We think that's a destructive one. But as Karl alluded to there, the third shot's the one that can actually put you in the position to make double and triple bogey by trying to get a bit too cute, by trying to land it just over the edge of a pot bunker and land it, close to the flag. Whereas a smart play really is to just make sure you get it on the green. And as Karl said, that's a handicap.
Yeah.
Green regulation.
That's a great
use your
concept.
shots wisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We speak to people all the time, handicap golfers, who say, I only hit 5 greens yesterday. Okay, so and you're playing golf what, 14? Yeah. Well, that's pretty good. That's actually a pretty good greens regulation stat. If the top players in the world are hitting 12, 13 greens on a decent day, then 5 or 6 greens a day is really not too bad an effort.
That's right.
That Tony is it's such a great strategy to put alongside the third shot. Whatever your handicap is, just look through the scorecard and just work out what would be a handicap green in regulation based on the stroke index. And I think the way that you look at the golf course will change dramatically. And it might seem a little bit defensive, but actually it's not. You're just using very, very good strategy, and a strategy that, without changing anything else in your swing, what you're paying attention to can have a massive impact on your scoring.
It's one of the great parts of this book that golfers of all levels will get something out of it. There was another important part of the book, I thought, which is talking about facts instead of opinions. And, to me, this was kind of interesting because, obviously, some people get hung up about so much data from TrackMan and all these things, but just understanding the facts about how you play and I think is another way to help you to play your best golf. Talk a little bit about that part of the book and some of the concepts you had there.
Yeah, I think Gary can probably go into a little bit more detail about the benefits of using TrackMan wisely, but I think facts, not opinions. The number of players who've been out with that, Tony, in terms of how you actually react to shots in the sense that what most of us tend to do is fall into what I call the opinion trap, that you hit a bad shot and then all of a sudden that you're an idiot and you can't play this game and you're useless, and then that can very quickly turn into you shouldn't even exist on planet Earth, and that's just because of where a golf ball's gone. We're actually when you deal in facts and you sort of limit yourself to when you've hit the golf ball, you're only allowed to deal in facts. You know, you hit it heavy, you hit it off the toe, you hit it off the heel. You felt the path was to the left, whatever it may be, based on what the golf ball's done, and facts lead to a closure on that shot. Whereas what opinions spark emotion. And the problem is when those opinions spark emotion, we tend to spiral very often in the wrong direction, so that the shot that you've just played then can very easily contaminate the shot that you're attempting to play next. So I think from a mental game perspective on the golf course itself, facts rather than opinions can be really useful. But I know Gary would have some interesting thoughts from a sort of coaching golf swing perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, without even delving too deep into data or TrackMan numbers, if the ball comes up 5 yards short and 10 yards right of your intended target, that's a fact. Now, we may form an opinion about why that happens, but then we're probably going to say, I got ahead of that one, I left the face open a little bit, I did this, I did that, I did the next thing. Now, we don't really know for sure if any of these things happened, but what we do know for sure is the ball came up 5 yards right, 5 yards short and 10 yards right. And as Karl said, you can gain some closure from that and you can move on to the next shot and start paying attention to the next shot then, rather than spending the next 5 minutes worrying about why that happened, why it came up 5 yards short and 10 yards right. Yeah. And if you can deal with that and move on, then you can really start to pay attention to the next shot, which, as Ben Hogan famously said many, many times, and it's been repeated 1,000 times, if not more, the most important shot in golf is the next one.
Yeah, for sure. Instead of just trying to fix the world after you've hit a shot that didn't go where you thought it was going to go. That's a great way to keep at it and keep playing your best.
Just on that, Tony, I'd recommend people who are listening just to set yourself the opinion challenge. See if you can play around the golf. Just go hole by hole and see how many opinions just come out of your mouth or in your head. And you just even an awareness of this is enlightening for a lot of players.
And I think if you actually, at the end of the round, if you write down all these opinions that you've formed about yourself, you probably wouldn't like yourself very much.
That's an interesting challenge. I help a junior college team. I'm going to make sure they try to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of the things you talk about in the book too kind of connect another realm of things. Flexibility, consistency, acceptance, intention. I think they're all connected in some way to playing your best, and sometimes not playing your best if you're not flexible, if you think you're perfectly consistent all the time, if you don't accept things, right? So talk about, for each of you, what are some of the important things about those words in terms of helping golfers to play their best?
Well, I think the first thing to understand and recognize is that the consistency is this elusive, mythical thing that everyone's searching for, but no one has ever actually attained. You know, there's a graphic in the book that shows Brooks Koepka's season in a bell chart, basically, his scoring.
I looked at that graphic this morning, by the way.
It's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, his stroke average might be 69.4, I think it was, for 2018. But in actual fact, the difference between his highest score and his lowest score was 15 shots. Now, if you ask most handicapped golfers in competition rounds how many shots between their highest and their lowest scores, they probably say, it's pretty bad actually, it's about 8, 9, maybe 10 or something. And then you show them that chart and they go, right, okay. So that's what consistency looks like. Consistency, what is consistency? all the best players in the world. In fact, the majority of tour pros. I kind of paid a lot of attention to this when I was spending a lot of time on tour, and I kind of figured out that it's the old 80-20 rule. Most guys on tour who kept their cards and did pretty well, had a good season, they would make 80% of their money in 20% of their tournaments. Now, that's not really consistency. They would play great for maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks throughout the year. The rest of the season, they'd be missing a few cats. They'd be finishing 45th to 55th or 60th or 33rd or whatever it was. But it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work any other way, really. Even the best players in the world, they don't shoot 69 every time they play. They don't shoot 66 every time they play. Again, when you watch golf on TV, we get a kind of skewed view because all we're really seeing are the best players in the world playing their best on that given day or that given week. So this myth of consistency, I think if we can start to understand and accept that consistency really doesn't exist, then you can stop beating yourself up quite as much.
And particularly those of us who, aren't at the level of those guys. I mean, to think that we're
these guys are doing it all day, every day, and they can't do it. So, why should we be able to do it? We only play once in a while, once a week, whenever it is.
It was interesting, Tony. Fred Shoemaker came on my podcast a while ago, and he was talking about a mastery group that he had, and these guys meet up every month, I think, they've done for years. And he said, one of his students, he said he finally came to Fred, and he said I've made peace with the uncertainty, and I thought that was a great phrase, really. That this consistency idea and how you felt yesterday. Unfortunately, you've gone to sleep, you've eaten certain things, you've interacted with certain people. It's not the same human being that comes to the golf course the next day. So why on earth would it feel? Should we even believe that the things that we felt yesterday are going to come with us tomorrow? When we all patently know that doesn't happen. But when you embrace these ideas about flexibility, and maybe we should champion adaptability more than anything else. The ability to adapt. What have I got today? What are the things I need to work with today? What are the shots I've got today? Perhaps more importantly than anything else. And then all of a sudden we tune into the golf course a little bit more, listen to the questions that the course is asking today, and try and answer it with the shots that we've got today.
It gives us a lot better chance to play the best that we're going to play today.
Yeah,
right.
Because the golf course may be actually asking different questions on Friday than it did on Thursday. The wind could switch 180 degrees, and all of a sudden it's asking you completely different questions. Yeah.
Well, there was the next question is about a person, and that's Marcus Westerberg. And I really enjoyed the things in the book. I listened. I went back and listened to the podcast you've done with him, Karl, and I bought his book. It's in the list, right? And I'm really looking forward to reading that at some point. But talk a little bit about some of the things you guys have gleaned from his work and his efforts. He was a past tour player too, right? I think so.
He was, yeah. Funnily enough, we've just been talking to him.
We literally just off the phone to him,
an hour ago.
How about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that Marcus talks about in the book, which is really, really interesting. I mean, I think you have a similar situation in the States, Tony, that we have in certainly in Great Britain. That the number of people playing golf is declining, and certainly the number of people who stay with the game of golf is declining. And all the usual things are trotted out, that it's too expensive and it takes too much time and all this kind of stuff. And yet when you look at what kids do, they'll think nothing of being on a PlayStation for 4 or 5 hours or whatever. So I think when we really enjoy something, we actually find ways of doing it. And Marcus did a great study in Sweden, and he found that a lot of people in Sweden had stopped playing golf, and the actual reason why they stopped playing golf was they just didn't feel they were good enough, and they didn't feel that they'd made any progress. And he said, surely the way that the game is coached has an awful lot to answer for in this. It's not just as simple as it takes too long or it's too expensive. And Marcus reinforced that the golf swing that you see somebody make is very much determined by the concepts that they have. And the idea that trying to just change the swing in isolation will never happen. He talks about the fundamental paradox, doesn't he? About most people who play golf have got the lifting reflex because they've lifted the ball in tennis or they've lifted the ball in other racket sports, and that's why it interests. Unless we have a clear concept of how the golf ball is propelled in the air as a result of interacting with the loft of the club, you can try and coach somebody so many different moves in the swing, but unless they've got really clear concepts, nothing will change. But the beauty of that is that when you build good concepts for players, some amazing movements can emerge as a result of that.
And then, unfortunately, we have 10 million concepts in most of the magazines that we read.
The concepts tend to be about opinions about how a golf swing should look, about where the club should be on the downswing, or the positions that it should be in relative to other people. Those are all concepts based on a model of how a golf swing looks. What we don't drill down deeply enough into is what concept does that human being have about what they're actually trying to do to play the game. And I completely agree with Marcus. If you get the concepts right about ball and club interaction and what produces ball flight, when those concepts are clear, better movements tend to emerge as a result of that.
Yeah, once you've got a very clear concept of what creates the shot, what makes the ball behave in a certain manner. So we're going back to the concept of the shot creating the swing. Once you know how to make the ball do something, what makes the ball do something, then you can start to build a technique around that task. But the traditional coaching culture, if you like, has always been, if we get the technique right, the outcome will happen anyway. Well, I think we've all hit enough golf balls over the years to know that doesn't necessarily happen too often. We've all seen guys with fantastic golf swings that just can't play. And yet they get the other guy who has a real clear concept of what the ball needs to do and what he wants to do with that ball. His swing just takes care of the task. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading his book. Maybe a little while, but I've got a big trip coming up, and I'm probably going to take it with me.
I hope you got the one that's in English, Tony, rather than one that's...
I looked at it. I think it's in English. Gosh, I hope so.
Well, that's good, because otherwise it could take you quite some time to get through it.
No, goodness. Now, you've got a great summary of a lot of training exercises in the book. How about each of you, and they could be the same one, talk about what your personal favorite training exercises are in that list.
Karl, do you want to go first?
Yeah, my favourite, Tony, is based on this idea that we should be training for what's bound to happen at golf. Now, if we all know what's bound to happen, even for the best players in the world, is when you go out on the golf course, you're gonna miss a bunch of greens. You're trying to hit as many greens as possible, but you're going to miss a bunch of them. So surely we should be actually training for that eventuality. So one training game that we've had a lot of success with all levels of players is, it sounds counterintuitive really, that you play 9 holes. It's called deliberate miss, where you with your approach shot, you deliberately miss the green, but in the best possible place to get up and down. So actually, it becomes a very specific target. It actually helps you hit more greens, paradoxically. So you deliberately miss the green on the front bunker or the open space on the left, and you play 9 holes and see what kind of score you can put together by actually missing every single green. If you hit the green, you have to add 1 shot to your score. And it's a lot of fun as well. I mean, especially if you go and play it with a couple of your pals. But the report back is that people have said, number one, it really makes them look at the golf course, number one, which is a big theme of the book. But also the idea that, wow, I can still get it round in something like a reasonable score, missing every single green. Well, if I go out and play at the weekend and I only manage to hit a few greens, I know based on my training, I can still hit I can still put a reasonable score together. But the concept really is about looking at using the golf course more. You know, we just tend to have a dichotomy really, where we go to the range to practice and then we go and play on the golf course. Well, why? That's a relatively new thing. Probably up until the 1950s, people just played golf. They trained on the golf course, and I think, you know, my message for a lot of people listening, if you're really, really serious about it, if you want lower scores, you should be thinking about, how can I use the golf course as a training ground, rather than just always reverting back to bashing balls on the practice ground.
Well, okay, that's one. Now, how about one more then?
Okay, I'm going to throw one at you here. Okay. One of my favorites is what we call wrong club golf. So let's say you hit your drive down the middle of the first fairway, as you always do, Tony, obviously.
Yeah, right.
And you get your ball, and you know, you figure out your yardage, you figure out where the flag is, and it would normally be a 6-iron. So you've either got to use a 5-iron or a 7-iron. So you've got to create something a little bit different. Because how often do we play golf and we've got the perfect yardage for a given club? Very, very rarely. It's either you've got to take a little bit off a 5-iron, you've got to hit a hard 7-iron, whatever it is. So if you go out and actually train to do that and deliberately choose the wrong club, so if you normally hit a 6-iron for your second shot for the distance you're left with, you've then got to think, right, okay, I've got to be a bit creative here. How can I get a 7-iron to cover that distance and play this shot, to create this shot? How can I maybe do that with a 5-iron? And all of a sudden, you're, again, going back to what Karl said there, you start to think about, okay, can I use that bank on the left-hand side to help gather the ball right into the green? If I hit a draw into this green, or I hit a fade into that green, if I hit it a little bit higher, it might land a little bit softer with a 5-iron. If the flag's up the back of the green, maybe it's a low draw with a 7-iron. I can chase it up to the back of the green towards where the flag's situated. And all of a sudden, you start getting very creative, and all your kind of standard or normal swing thoughts just tend to leave your mind completely, freeing you up to just get into playing mode, into playing golf. We find that extremely helpful and an awful lot of fun.
Well, and instead of, okay, it's a 6-iron from 160 yards, and, you know, often what that is, for example, like for me, I've got to hit a perfect shot, right? Find a shot that you know you're going to be able to do.
Yeah, and by training that on the golf course, you will soon find out which one works best.
Yeah.
You know, if 7-iron keeps coming up short all the time and 5-iron actually covers the distance better than a 6-iron would, then maybe you're not quite so, you don't hit your 6-iron quite as far as you think you did.
Yeah, well.
So there's all sorts of things you can learn from it.
Yeah.
It also ties in with another central theme, Tony, as well, that on any given day you might not have your swing, but you'll always have some shots.
Yes.
I had that happen yesterday. It's funny because I had my best score of the year yesterday. But,
well done.
And it was fun. I shot 74, 2 over, okay? But on the last hole, if I had not tried to hit a perfect shot, I probably would have hit a little 3 or 4 hybrid up on the green, or at least close, but I had to try to hit the perfect 6-iron, right? and
you were going for the Hollywood shot.
Oh yeah, there you go. But that's but you know, maybe I learned from that. Well,
yeah, absolutely.
We're going to end today with at least my thoughts. You know, the book is coming to me. I think it may be in the airwaves right now. You know, the actual hard copy of it. But my plan is to to try to find about 10 different things in it and put little stickies on it, and from time to time look at them and take little pieces of it and try to find some way to improve. What are your thoughts about the best ways for golfers to use what you've put in this really great book?
I'll go first on this one.
Yeah, go on, Gary.
The way we kind of designed the book was, if you want to read it from start to finish, then great, that's fine. But it's also designed that you can actually go back to certain chapters at certain times. But for me, all the best kind of instruction books I've ever read, they've always been there'll be something in there that's applicable to you at any given moment in time. So it might be that this part of your game is off, or that part of your game's off, or something's just not quite right. Now, without having to read through the entire book again, you can go back to a specific section that if you've got your stickies there, you can think, right, okay, I remember that was really helpful at the time. So let's revisit that and see if I can get just maybe just lost a little bit of clarity on my understanding and concept of what was really going on at that given moment in time. And then you can kind of reconnect to what was helping you in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Anything else?
For me, what I suggest people do is read the book, but look for the bigger concepts in the book rather than all the details are great, and you can personalize the details. But if you look for the bigger concepts in the book, you'll really begin to personalize them for yourself. You know, the concepts, things like the shot creates the swing, and your opponent is the course designer. And I think that would be my hope, that people would read the book. They would take the bigger concepts in the book and really then perhaps look at the game slightly differently, but essentially that they personalize those concepts, as you said. You know, you find out what are the important things for you as a unique individual.
The word concepts, how many times have you said it today? At least a dozen, right?
Yeah, maybe more.
Once or twice.
Yeah, it's just a huge thing in people being able to play their best and enjoying the game more.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys, particularly for hanging in with our little. No, not because of that, but I mean, this is a great book. It's a great addition to any golfer's library who's looking to play better. I'll put links in the show notes to obtaining it. And there's a lot of ways of getting it. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it on through Amazon. No, not Amazon. I guess you are selling it directly through the website. And also...
And Amazon as well, yeah.
Yeah. And anybody reading it is going to get who loves golf is going to get something to make their game better. So thanks for what you did here.
It's our pleasure, Tony. Thanks for inviting us again. We've enjoyed the chat, even if it took a couple of weeks to complete.
But
all we did was we just had a bit of a break after 9 holes. We spent a little bit too long in the halfway house, but that's absolutely fine by us.
When I was in Ireland about 5 or 6 years ago, the rain was going sideways, and we stopped at 9 and had a hot toddy. Yeah, so that's maybe what we did. I don't know.
That's what we did.
Let's call it that.
we finished strong. We finished strong anyway.
Exactly.
Thank you again.
Game Improvement Golf. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores.
Gary and Karl, thank you for coming back and sharing some of the great content from your new book. And especially for hanging in with the recording technical difficulties that I had when we first started recording the interview. I think that for golfers wanting to play their best golf, this is a book that you need to read and use. It's kind of funny, this morning something happened that I'll share. I thought a few weeks ago that my favorite concept in the book would be about what they call the third shot. But this morning, I also realized that the concept of understanding the important difference between facts and opinions and how to make appropriate use in these and how to make appropriate use of these in your golf performance can be equally, if not more important. So I guess the point is, there's a lot of great information in this book. So I put links in the show notes to how you can contact Gary and Karl, and also to where you can purchase their new book, The Lost Art of Playing Golf. Just a small message for someone, a good friend, who's moving into a new home in the Pittsburgh area. You might want to not buy this book once you listen to this interview, because I'm pretty sure a copy of it will be coming to your new house address sometime soon. My shout out today is for golfers who've trusted me to create their golf clubs, and to everyone who listens and enjoys my podcast, blogs, and newsletter. Thank you. It's an honor to be connected with all of you and to hopefully somehow help each of you play your best golf. Well, that's it for today. In 2 weeks, there are a couple of great options brewing right now, including my attending the 14th Annual Association of Golf Club Fitting Professionals Roundtable in about a week. Trust that I'll bring you some great new content and information in episode 138. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com